So I'm always bullish. I think what we've seen this cycle so far is just this constant, it's really not volatile. Like Bitcoin has this rather unique volatility skew where upside volatility is actually, prices options much more aggressively. So you end up with upward skew.
Hmm.
Whereas in traditional markets, you see skew much more to the downside where put protection is much more expensive. In Bitcoin, it's always the reverse because you see such explosive upside moves. This time so far, and obviously we've had a big move over the weekend just gone. Um, it feels like we're getting to the point where we've got indigestion from the amount of demand coming through versus the supply coming out. I think Jesse Myers has a really good explainer. Croz's BTC, I think he wrote it
Hmm.
under. But a really good explainer about how we get through the sort of secondary supply of Bitcoin that's available at the sort of the new price post halving. And then once it's eaten through all of that, then you get this massive spike because we're in price discovery. And it definitely felt that 2020, 2021, we had a somewhat mooted cycle because of all the nonsense with FTX and obviously the Fed having a hard reverse after, telling everybody that we were not going to be likely having any kind of rate rises. So it was a bit of a shock to the market. So it felt like 2021 never actually managed to have its bull cycle. Um, so it feels this time that we're on our way there, and obviously it does look a lot like 2017. However, the step changes, what I was trying to get to, the step changes haven't been so volatile. So you go up, you get to 120K, you sort of sit there for a while. You overshoot a little bit and then you come back down, it's level off. And so it feels like we've done that all the way along from 70K when we touched 70K on the back of the tariff shock in April. We've been 70K, 85K, 95K, 100K, 110K, and it's just been step, step, step. And it just feels like the buyers, obviously the treasuries are a big buyer, the Bitcoin treasuries, they're a big buyer and they're just eating up all that supply at those levels and then grind to the next level. And it feels very much like that's what we're doing this cycle. Although now, of course, we're coming into price discovery. So where do we go? I mean, I've been saying this year I expect 200,000. I don't think that's is a very ridiculous estimate. I think it's entirely possible. And it's, potentially not going to take an enormous amount of dollars in to get us to that additional, almost 2 trillion of market cap.
Do you think that we have I got numerous questions I kind of like to spin off here, but my first one is, do you think what are your thoughts on just the cycle here that we're in? Do you think it's because a lot of it has seemed like over the years that you kind of have these 4, 5, 6 month really hard run ups, kind of like what you were alluding to in a way, these stair steps, and then it runs up. Whether did it end in 2017, did it end in 2021, or earlier in 2021, but then again later in 2021? What are your thoughts on? Are you a cycles guy? Do you think there will be some type of breakout in the sense of a super cycle? When you look out across the bow in terms of that, how do you see things playing out?
I've been of the opinion that we'll see the super cycle um, pretty soon. I thought it was a possibility last cycle, um, but now you've got everything just lined up. I could never have imagined that we'd be as far progressed as we are now, where you've got US with a Bitcoin strategic reserve policy. You've got the state of Texas trying to buy Bitcoin now. You've got the Pakistani government trying to buy Bitcoin. You've got Bhutan, El Salvador, mining and trying to acquire more Bitcoin. And you've got Saudi and Abu Dhabi buying the ETFs, and in the case of Saudi's sovereign wealth fund buying actual Bitcoin. So you've got a huge amount of sovereign interest in Bitcoin. You got the ETFs, which is seeing more and more flow, and I think that's where a lot of the retail flow is going now, is into the ETFs. But obviously, that's opening up the 401ks, and you're seeing more and more of the brokers coming online, being able to buy Bitcoin. And then, of course, you've got the BTCs, the Bitcoin corporate treasuries, and I see that as a phenomena that is just in its infancy. I think we're going to see more and more of these companies pop up. Obviously, the goal of UTXO is to have one of these countries in every national stock market globally, and I think they'll achieve that. I mean, I hear about more and more of these companies every single day. So we are absolutely in the expedited growth phase of this, but I think it can persist for a while. And as long as the companies stay away from any kind of excessive debt or non-convertible debt, then I think it's very sustainable. A lot of the critics of the Bitcoin treasury space talk about leverage. Oh, this is going to be the next leverage blow up in crypto, and they just obviously once again haven't done the work. They think that I think someone came up with the acronym LBE, with the L being leveraged to describe these companies. Yeah, that's a bad name because it implies there's leverage, and the sort of the lazy critic is going to say, "Oh, well, you're leveraged, and so therefore you're gonna blow up when the cycle reverses." Well, I think we're getting to a point where the cycle's reversal is going to be a lot shallower. I don't think you're going to have these deep bear markets like we used to have before. I think everyone sees that as an accumulation opportunity. I certainly know when Bitcoin dipped to 70,000 in April, I was doing everything I possibly could to try and borrow money to buy more Bitcoin ETFs through my bank. But I think we're in a very different cycle. We're at a very different stage. It's got to the sovereign level now, which, coming back to the point we were discussing earlier, is even more of a concern, right? Because that single mother in London is now really late, is going to be late. There's going to be a point where they're going to be late. And rather than being able to buy potentially one Bitcoin, they're going to, struggle to buy scraps with their remaining life's work and their savings. So, this is why I always want to do these podcasts, to try and reach as many people as possible, because they're, if you go onto these platforms like LinkedIn, there's these people trying to.
You and Bram.
It's awful.
Glutton for punishment.
It's just an awful place. Yeah. I don't know how Bram does it. Like, he goes on there on a regular basis to try and sort of counter all these critics who know absolutely nothing about Bitcoin, but do everything they can to try and keep people away from Bitcoin. It's really sad that people do that. I don't understand why they do that. It's maybe just to get more followers. I don't know what they're doing, actually.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Where do you think? And again, these are some. This one's even tougher when it comes to price and just like where you think things are headed. But where in 10 years, Saylor talks about the gold rush, the digital gold rush, obviously the next 10 years or so. Where do you fall on his spectrum, I guess, of, we'll say even 10 or 20 years from now, like when you see the base case. I know he's kind of updated just recently a little bit, but the 3 million to 13 million, or 3 million to 20 million, somewhere in there, and then 45 million or what have you, in 20 years. Like, where do you fall on that spectrum of his cases?
Yeah, look, I think Saylor does a remarkable job of communicating this stuff to people, and being able to, like we said before, being able to speak to a much broader community than I can speak to. But I think it was funny. I took my daughter to BTC Prague, and she was bored out of her mind most of the time. And but I'd been on stage just before Saylor, so she was already watching the stage when he came on, and I didn't, because there was just people everywhere, obviously, for the Saylor thing. So I didn't get to see her until after the Saylor talk. And so she was sat there with, I think it was with Neil Jacobs, actually. And yeah, she listened to everything he said, and it really spoke to her. And she came out.
Wow.
She was like, "Yeah, Dad, you need to get to 48 Bitcoin, because if you get to 48 Bitcoin, then by the time I'm 32, I'll be a billionaire." I was
Oh my
like,
goodness.
"Well, yeah." Somehow you took in the numbers and you were sitting there doing the maths. It was good.
Amazing.
But look, he's really clear, and I think, obviously, to have a young person engage to that level, then it's great, because obviously he engages everybody. I think that pays attention. I think that talk was very good in terms of getting into the numbers. Obviously he's done some fiddling around with the spreadsheets and thinking, and
Yep.
we're going to get to the point where measuring Bitcoin in dollars is a fairly ridiculous exercise anyway. You just want as much Bitcoin as you can possibly get, and one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. Volatility goes to zero because you measure everything in Bitcoin, right? So
Yep.
I think
Yep.
I think fiat measurement, when you get out that long in the timeline, when you're talking 21 years, I think it'll become slightly ridiculous, as he's suggesting with his modeling, right?
Right. Where do you stand in terms? You have like, Peter Dunworth, who I'm good friends with, where he's like, it's, Bitcoin's going to be $1 billion. It's going to be multiples of the 900 trillion, global assets. You've got Jeff Booth, who says it's going to be it's all 900 trillion. Bitcoin has to account for everything in the system. And then you have like a Jack Mallers, who's, it's Bitcoin's one half of every transaction, and money's one half. So he's a 450 trillion market cap type of guy for Bitcoin itself. Where do you, and then there's obviously people all under that as well. Where do you stand on the total addressable market, the TAM for Bitcoin? Like, when you look at Bitcoin as an asset, as a money, an investment, all these things, because that's what's remarkable about Bitcoin. It's all of these things together. Where do you, like, how do you stack it up? Like, what is its total, what is its end game? Like, where does it eventually end up on that ladder?
Yeah, I'm going to disappoint you with my answer, I guess. I think we get to a point where trying to evaluate in fiat, as Peter Dunworth said, when he's saying billions of
Worthless.
dollars
Yeah.
of Bitcoin, I mean, it's just like, dollars worthless. Like, what's it worth in Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin's worth everything. Dollars worth nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it just comes down to this: Saylor says it best. Only put the money you don't want to lose in Bitcoin, right? Like, that's the sort of his latest. You should only invest in Bitcoin the money you can't afford to lose, right? And I think that's perfect. Like, that just says it perfectly. It doesn't matter what the price is. You just, like, because the price in fiat doesn't mean anything. It's like, the price in fiat is just basically the market telling you that most of the world don't understand Bitcoin yet, right? That's what the price of Bitcoin in dollars is telling you, right? I always say, like, when you break it down into what Bitcoin is, like, Bitcoin is so superior to gold in terms of a store of value asset, that when you break it down into the various different monetary properties of gold, and you say, okay, you can see very clearly that Bitcoin is multiple times better than gold, even if we just put it at gold's market cap, which today would imply a price of $1.1 million, so $23 trillion, then Bitcoin is, 90% undervalued. So do you want to buy something that is 90% undervalued? Yes, because the market will eventually work it out. And it's at least 90% undervalued because it's better than gold. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry I can't give you some sort of longer term view, but I just think that we get to the point of completely breaking when your circle of friends becomes, rather than 5% of your circle of friends, it becomes 70% of your circle of friends, then the fiat price doesn't matter anymore. It's irrelevant.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.